Welcome back. In the last video we talked about the importance of filtration and reabsorption when it comes to making urine. And in this video we're going to go over a second-hand investigation you would have done in class. You guys probably can all remember this one. It was a first-hand investigation of the structure of the mammalian kidney by dissection. Use of a model or visual resource and identify the regions involved in the excretion of waste products. So basically the dissection of the mammalian kidney. Before we start going over exactly what you looked at, we go over a quick overview of what we know about the kidney so far. The kidney was a functional unit, or a functional unit of the kidney was the nephron. So that word nephron was the functional unit. So basically, the cell of the kidney was the nephron. The kidney itself is made up of millions of nephrons. So more or less, the only thing that is important when it comes to the kidney are these nephrons. Kidneys filter out urea, so one of their main roles is to filter out nitrogenous waste, and that's urea. And kidneys also help regulate water and salt levels. And there's a new word, I don't think I've mentioned it so far, and that was osmoregulation. I should also remember that one. Osmoregulation was the balance of water and salt in our body. So remember, that has to be balanced at a fine level to make sure we have an isotonic environment in our body. And osmoregulation makes sure that our salt and water levels are balanced correctly to make sure that happens. This picture we've looked over a few times as well. So you would have known the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus. Hopefully by now this is not something completely new. These two areas, right, so this area here was the area that all that filtration starts at. Filtration happens right there. And then we've got reabsorption happening at the kidney itself, which is that second part of the kidney being the proximal tube. That's where most of the reabsorption happens. So most of the reabsorption. And the reabsorption of all that good stuff. So mainly of the nutrients and of salt as well. And we also have the excretion of poison as well, or of drugs. So excretion refers to getting rid of or putting into. So excretion of drugs and poisons also happens at that proximal tube. So then we go down the loop of Henle and through the distal tube, and once that the liquid, which is called a filtrate, once it gets to here, so that collecting duct, that's when we call it urine. Right? So that was. Yeah, but all this was just a recap of what we've done in the last couple of videos. And now to the dissection of your kidney. So you would have done a longitudinal section. So remember, that was cutting it into half. So if you sliced it into half, you would have had your longitudinal section of the kidney itself. And this is something like what it looked like. And in terms of what you need to know for your exam and for your assignments, is identify the regions involved in the excretion of waste products. So main regions would have been this one here, the urethra. I'll go over this and the pelvis as well, right here. But I'll go over quickly where these nephrons actually are. So I'm going to draw one nephron. I'm going to start with the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus. So you can imagine the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule being right here. From there we go into the proximal tube. That's that tube, this tube right here. And then down into the loop of Henle. And this is what I'm going to be drawing next in light blue. So that down into the loop of Henle. And back up. And then into the distal tube. I'll draw that in yellow. So that will be here. And then that collecting duct, which is this part here, which collects all the urine. That I draw in purple, and that basically goes from here all the way into the pelvis. So what you can imagine, you have your filtration happening in the medulla. So medulla is where your filtration occurs. Medulla is where your filtration occurs because that's where your Bowman's capsule is. Then you will go into loop of Henle, which is in your cortex. Actually, sorry, your medulla, your cortex was was where your filtration occurs. The cortex is this white area here. All of that white area is your cortex, and that's where filtration occurs because your Bowman's capsule is there. Your medulla was actually where your loop of Henle, so your medulla is where we have reabsorption of salts. And that's that, that strange looking part. And then going from your cortex all the way down into your pelvis is your collecting duct. So urine travels down collecting duct. But the most important part you need to know is kind of gist. You need to have a gist where the actual nephron is, which is both. So all of this area here, from your cortex, from your medulla here to the cortex up here, you can imagine there will be millions of nephrons lined up from all the way. So all of these areas, all of that is nephrons. And then we have our pelvis. So the pelvis is where all that urine goes to at the end. So it's a massive pool of urine, more or less, your pelvis. That's this part. This part is your pelvis. And that's area where urine sort of dumps into, you could say. So all those collecting ducts will empty into the pelvis. And then it will travel down the ureter. Now when it comes to the kidneys will look like something like this. You're going to have your kidneys, you have your ureter, and then you have your bladder. So the ureter is the tube that connects kidney to bladder. So for that dot point, what you need to know is the identified regions involved in excretion of waste product. You need to know where the ureter is, which is right here of the kidney, that part. You need to know where the pelvis is. And it's good to know where the renal artery and the renal vein is. This is where the blood comes in. Remember, artery is A, stands for away from the heart, so this is where it comes in. And then this is where the blood, after it's been recycled or filtered, it'll come out. So it goes in here. I will change color. Goes in here. It comes out there. And know that the cortex and medulla, those two spots are where we have our nephrons. So you might be able to ask to draw it, or you might be able to ask to label it, one of those two. So I hope that was helpful.